There are over 600 people on California death row. This is part 2 of the series. William Proctor, 41 years on death row. Proctor entered the home of a widow living alone, essayed her and tortured her, then put her body in the trunk of a car to dispose of it near a lake. John Visciotti, 41 years on death row. Fired from their jobs at a burglar alarm company, Visciotti and another man robbed 2 other employees on their payday, killing one and shooting the other 3 times. Robert Bloom, 40 years on death row. Bloom shot to death his father, stepmother, and 8-year-old stepsister, whom he also stabbed 23 times in the face with scissors. He pleaded insanity and was allowed to represent himself at trial. Bloom's sentence was overturned, but he was resentenced to death in 2001. Richard Boyer, 40 years on death row. Boyer stabbed 2 elderly people to death during a robbery of their Fullerton home. His first conviction was overturned, but he was condemned again on retrial. David Carpenter, 40 years on death row. Trailside killer Carpenter assaulted hikers on remote paths in Santa Cruz and Marin counties in 1980 and 1981, raping some and shooting 7 to death. Dean Carter, 40 years on death row. Carter killed 4 women in 2 counties. He had a pattern of essaying, robbing, and fatally strangling women whom he previously had befriended. Murder charges in a 5th killing were dismissed. Martin Drews, 40 years on death row. Drews and another parolee from the California Youth Authority stabbed a man to death on New Year's Eve and was in prison for that murder when he killed another inmate. Michael Jackson, 40 years on death row. While high from PCP-laced cigarettes, Jackson shot a police officer responding to a call of a barefoot, disheveled man acting strangely in a neighborhood. Jackson had grabbed the officer's shotgun during the struggle that had ensued. William Kirkpatrick, 40 years on death row. Kirkpatrick killed 2 employees at the Taco Bell where he once worked and robbed the store. Robert Lewis, 40 years on death row. Lewis killed a man, stealing his cash and the Cadillac the man had advertised for sale. Charles McDowell, 40 years on death row. During a midday robbery, McDowell broke into a house and killed the housekeeper who was working at the time. A federal appellate panel in 1997 vacated the death penalty and ordered the case back to state court for retrial. Charles Moore, 40 years on death row. With 2 accomplices, he returned to a Long Beach apartment complex where he once lived and robbed the couple that managed the complex, stabbing them to death during the crime. Scott Penholster, 40 years on death row. He stabbed to death 2 men during a 1982 drug robbery. His lawyer claimed childhood brain injuries left him unstable and he was institutionalized at a psychiatric hospital as a child. The Ninth Circuit overturned his death sentence, but a divided U.S. Supreme Court reinstated it in 2011, saying federal judges had overstepped their bounds in second-guessing the state court. Mark Riley, 40 years on death row. Riley and accomplice James Hardy were condemned for stabbing to death a woman and her 8-year-old son in Van Nuys in 1983 at the request of the husband, who sought to collect on a life insurance policy. Hardy's conviction was later overturned. Gerald Stanley, 40 years on death row. Stanley, a professional hunting guide, killed his second wife. 15 years later, he stalked and killed his third wife, burning down her house and her car and tracking her to a resort where he shot her with a high-powered rifle. Andre Burton, 39 years on death row. Burton robbed 2 women and stole their truck. He used the vehicle to drive to another location where he shot a man in the face twice to steal a bag of coins and then shot and killed the man's mother. Michael Cox, 39 years on death row. Cox, a convalescent care worker who slept in his car, killed 3 teen girls he knew from a Placerville foster home and dumped their naked bodies in the El Dorado National Forest. Raynard Cummings, 39 years on death row. Following a string of robberies, Cummings and partner Kenneth Gay killed a Los Angeles police officer after he pulled over a stolen car in which the men were passengers. Both men had been on parole for previous crimes. Jack Farnham, 39 years on death row. During a home robbery, Farnham essayed and sodomized a woman who had been alone in the house, then he killed her. Patrick Gordon, 39 years on death row. Gordon was the getaway driver for two armored car heists at Kmart stores in Riverside and Stockton, in which his brothers shot and killed the couriers. Dwayne Holloway, 39 years on death row. Holloway killed two sisters during a robbery of their townhouse. Brian Mincy, 39 years on death row. Mincy killed the 5-year-old son of his girlfriend. Police reported repeated calls of violence at the house, and the beaten body of the boy had more than 100 injuries. The boy's 4-year-old sister also showed signs of beatings. Richard Ramirez, 39 years on death row. Ramirez sodomized and stabbed to death a 22-year-old woman he met at a dance club. Stephen Catlin, 38 years on death row. Catlin killed his mother and two of his ex-wives, poisoning them with paraquat to collect life insurance proceeds and his inheritance. Tiaquan Cox, 38 years on death row. Cox was a street gang member on parole when he and accomplices sought to carry out a contract killing. The killers went to the wrong address and executed NFL football player Kermit Alexander's mother, sister, and two nephews. On death row, cops stabbed another condemned inmate, and he was part of a 2000 escape attempt. Alexander is one of the most prominent voices behind Proposition 66, which would speed the appeals process and allow faster executions. John Dunkel, 38 years on death row. Dunkel, also known as the Peninsula serial killer, is a serial killer who murdered 3 young boys in Belmont, California between 1981 and 1985. Horace Kelly, 38 years on death row. Kelly killed an 11-year-old boy in Riverside who sought to prevent him from abducting his cousin as they walked home from a corner store on Thanksgiving. A week earlier, he killed 2 women and essayed the bodies in San Bernardino County. Denny Mickle, 38 years on death row. After Mickle moved in with a family living in a motel room, he stabbed their 12-year-old daughter to death and then set the room on fire. James Scott, 38 years on death row. Scott assaulted and essayed a woman in her home, then set her on fire. While she lived, he pleaded guilty to her essay and attempted murder. She later died of burn complications. Mauricio Silva, 38 years on death row. Within 3 weeks after being paroled from prison after serving time for murder, Silva killed 3 more people, including a 16-year-old boy he met on the road and a hitchhiker he picked up. David Brooks, 37 years on death row. A heroin addict who sold guns and drugs, he abducted and killed a woman to take her car during a string of robberies. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.